Hello, everyone. This is Dean Webb with Peerless for another Peerless podcast on starting out as an Infosec speaker. And today with us, we have Lisa Ventura from the UK Cybersecurity Association. I got that right, Lisa?
You did, yes. Hi there.
Okay. So tell us a little bit about how many years you have in the business and what the Cybersecurity Association is, Lisa.
Sure. So I started out in InfoSec back in 2009 when I joined Titania Limited, which was actually my ex-husband's company, and we sold a product called Nipper Studio. And when we separated in 2012, I knew that I wanted to stay within the industry. So I worked within various different companies. BT was one example, and I worked on their Assure Cyber product. And then around about 2017, 2018, I saw a gap for a membership association in cybersecurity in the UK.
Mhm.
The National Cybersecurity Centre had just come into to existence, but there was nothing really for individuals and companies to get involved with, to network at, to share best practice, to share what's going on a day-to-day basis with the growing cyber threats, data breaches, and so on. And so that's where the Cybersecurity Association was born. And what we're really big on now is getting across how important cybersecurity is. So we do a lot of cyber awareness, particularly aimed at small businesses and SMEs that wouldn't necessarily think that there's a lot that they have to do to be cybersecure aware, but of course they do.
Mhm. And yeah, so about those small businesses there,
Mm.
uh, we've talked about being able to present at
Mm.
conferences and gatherings of other security tech people. Uh, we've also spoken with a few people about how to reach non-technical crowds, and I think in this case here, uh, we've talked a lot about reaching schools and college groups and trade associations. What can we do about reaching the small business, the small and medium business market? Because for there, is it do we have to go with a particular business group, or are there associations of these SMBs that we're able to find? What do you have on that?
Sure.
Yeah.
So I've actually done a lot through my local Chamber of Commerce,
Uh-huh.
which then fed through to the British Chamber of Commerce, and so on. And
Mhm.
then I've actually done a lot of cybersecurity awareness talks as well around other trade associations. So, for example, the BCI, Business Continuity Association, and so on. And for me, it's just all about reaching that audience. To get them to really think seriously about cybersecurity, to get them to think, gosh, I could be hacked, I could be breached, and there are various things that I need to do. And some of them are going to sound, to the seasoned InfoSec professional, they are going to sound very basic things indeed. Things
Right.
like your two-factor authentication, watching out for phishing emails,
Mhm.
those kind of things. But to somebody that's just running a small business, there are things that they just wouldn't necessarily think about, making sure that their data is GDPR compliant, all of
Mhm.
those kind of things. So when I started out with the UK Cybersecurity Association, I knew that to reach that kind of audience, I would need to go and speak at different business networking groups, look at the Chamber of Commerce, the Federation of Small Businesses, and so on. So I didn't necessarily start off with speaking to an
Mhm.
InfoSec audience or InfoSec events, although that came a little bit later once I got the association established.
This is going to be like when you're talking to these groups, where
Mm.
exactly as you say, telling them you need antivirus, they're
Mm.
saying, "Oh, hold on, let me write that down." This is the first they've heard that. It sounds to me that those kinds of presentations aren't just one and done, where you say what you have to say and then move on. Is there a lot of follow-up activity once you've spoken to, let's say, a group of small business people at a chamber of commerce? What kind of follow-up do you expect, or could someone expect from an audience like that?
I've certainly been engaged with them and followed up following events. We've got things like 10 steps to cybersecurity, which we take a lot of the guidance from the National Cybersecurity Centre and pass that on to small businesses and SMEs through what we do. I've also got various different documentation that I send out to audience members for things like recommended antivirus programs, recommended two-factor authentication, all those things. So they'll hear about it in a talk, but then what I really like to do is to follow up with them afterwards, keep a dialogue going and send them some really useful information. And if I can help just one business avoid getting data breached or avoid having, you know, a cyber attack that could cripple them, that to me is worth everything. And that's where my passion lies.
So really it's like if you're giving these presentations to people who are brand new to the field, you anticipate and you hope for being able to speak to them again, either individually or as a follow-up conference.
Absolutely. And away from the association, I do a lot of cybersecurity awareness work. So a lot of what I do is focused around that whole education and awareness piece. So, for example, recently for a leading UK firm of solicitors, I worked on a phishing email simulation program. So there were regular emails going out that were set up to look like phishing emails. And we would look at analyze the amount of people that reported them to their managers or to the IT service help desk and so on. And also look at the amount of people that did actually click on them thinking it was a genuine email. So I do a lot of work around that and the psychology of phishing emails and why hackers do what they do, and then the insider threat as well, and educating businesses around that.
So it's almost like you're delivering self-defense training.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
but it really, no, it actually is not like you really are delivering self-defense training because, yeah.
If you could stop it at source or educate people to be, I have a great saying, people can be your weakest link, but they're also your best line of defense.
Yes. I like that. I like that. I'm going to change gears slightly here. One area I want to look into here, and we had a little chat about this before we started the recording, was dealing with setbacks. And one thing you were mentioning was a situation where you saw someone who arrived late and also had some special needs and was just treated badly. If you could tell that story and then give suggestions on what event planners might need to take into consideration, because I think that's another thing that people don't always think about, is that planners don't just magically appear. They're human beings and they're capable of mistakes and learning from them.
Yeah, absolutely. I attended a large-scale conference here in the UK last year and was very keen to see the keynote speaker. And there was a lady that arrived literally just 5 minutes late. She'd missed the train that she was meant to be on and there were further delays. And then the overzealous bouncers on the door when she did arrive wouldn't let her go into the talk. And if I'd known this, I would have very happily given my seat up and made her comfortable and so on. But then not only that, she was 8 months pregnant and she'd been very much looking forward to the event, was feeling a bit hot as it was a particularly hot day, asked for somewhere to sit down and was directed to this very uncomfortable marble stone bench to sit on at 8 months. But I wouldn't have wanted to sit on it, not 8 months pregnant. Bless her at that stage. Absolutely. Asked for some water, was told that they couldn't help with that. And, it's just those little things that can really make a big difference. I'm actually, myself, I'm actually autistic. I was diagnosed in 2018, and I have a lot in terms of sensory overload with lots of lights, noise, things like that I have to deal with when I go to events. So I think there's a lot of work being done. I know Jane Frankland here in the UK has done some brilliant work with event code of conduct, which would help a lot with situations like what I've just described. But also I think event organizers could, really speak to their speakers, literally
Right.
find out, what their needs are, find out what support they'll need. And it may not necessarily just be from an AV or a tech perspective. For me, I can't stand really, really bright lights. And there are times when I obviously have to stand up and do those talks with those kind of lights
Oh
on
my,
me.
yeah.
But I would much prefer that they were just a lot softer. And that's just one example.
Yeah, because I've been to events where it's been where the organizers knew what hospitality meant, and they
Mm.
made sure that there was bottled water here, soft drinks there. Or, do you need a diet drink? Oh, okay, well, we'll get that. Is there something I could do? They're always, and then there's other places where it's been, this very, very bare bones, and you can tell. I think the difference. I think people enjoy conferences more where the presenters are comfortable and relaxed and able to have that rapport. Would you agree on that?
Absolutely. And certainly from my perspective, I've enjoyed conferences where even before attending, I've known what to expect. I've spoken to them about any special dispensations, about, lighting and setup and
Mhm.
things like that. And for me as well, it does take a lot out of me to do it. So I have to
Mhm.
book in a good couple of days just to, relax and just, let what happened, regroup and so on. Because of the fact that I am autistic and I do, feel
Right,
things in a bit of a different way. So I always build in that downtime after any speaking engagement. It's not to say I'm not doing any work. It just means I'm not perhaps doing as many calls, or I'm not doing anything on video or anything, face to face. I just have that downtime
right,
to, allow me to regroup.
right. Yeah, I mean, myself, I've got some nerve damage, and I forget the fancy name for it, but it's there. and um, and yes, whenever I present, I like to ask for, can I get a stool
Mm-hmm.
with a cushion, so that way I don't have completely numb legs when I'm done with it. I can't stand, I can't sit on hard surfaces. The sort of the marble surface that would have gotten me as well.
Mm.
And I find it where people trying to understand how to deal with people who have special needs, who it's not that I'm broken, it's just that I need to be treated in a different way.
Yeah.
It's so difficult to get that across. um,
Absolutely. And there's no one size fits all for everybody. Everybody's going to have their own individual things that they need, or their own,
mhm,
sort of individual needs and so on. So that's kind of the advice I'd like to give to event organizers is talk to everybody if you can on an individual basis,
mhm.
and don't treat all the participants as, one as one group.
Right. Well, now you did talk about talking to everybody individually.
Mm,
In another incident you mentioned in our pre-discussion,
mm,
um, I'll just set it up with the question,
yeah.
Lisa, how do you deal with negative feedback?
Oh goodness. I,
Did you have an example you could share with the audience?
I, I certainly do. I was at I'd
Whoa,
spoken to
that's
the event
wonderful.
last year, and I afterwards I made my way to the ladies, as you do, just to freshen up. And
Mhm.
another lady came in who I'd looked up to for a long time within the cybersecurity industry, followed on social media, and she was quite inspirational. Also, I thought. And she came up to me and said that she really enjoyed my talk, and a lot of elements of it was on imposter syndrome,
Oh,
which is
yeah, that's
something I suffer
great.
from a lot and have to keep
Mhm,
in check quite a
mhm,
bit. So I engaged with a little bit of conversation with her, and then she moved on to talking about the Cybersecurity Association that I have,
mhm.
and said, "Oh, I don't think there's any, mileage in that. It's not going to take off. I don't see
Oh,
it as being anything, sort of
ow.
major." And she was quite threatening, and I felt
Really?
intimidated by her. She got quite close to me, and I just felt a bit threatened, and kind of the tone that
Mhm.
she took was intimidating. And she left, and I was left reeling from it, actually, and I was quite crushed, and my confidence had taken quite a beating, as you probably imagine
Oh
after
my,
something like
yeah.
that.
I mean, yeah, you
Um,
meet your hero, and then your hero tells you
yeah,
you're doing a lot of rubbish, and
yeah,
you should
yeah,
reconsider everything you're doing.
yeah.
Ow!
And it's tantamount to a bit of bullying, I feel, and that's
Yeah.
something I've had experience of quite a bit since childhood. That said, despite that had
Hmm.
happened, and I dusted myself off and I walked out, and there was obviously the exhibitor booth, so I went around some of those, and
Hmm.
I did have this moment of, what am I doing? Shall I just quit? Shall I just quit what I'm doing? This isn't going to work. I'm not working. I'm rubbish. I went through all of that, as you probably would expect
And,
after an
and that
encounter
is
of,
the imposter syndrome.
yeah,
The very thing you had talked about is
yeah,
now hitting you.
yeah, big
Yeah.
time. And it was
It's
there
hit
with
me
me for
too.
the,
So yeah.
yep, and it was there with me for the whole day.
Yeah.
Um, that same day, I found out, and I couldn't be at the actual award ceremony because
Hmm.
my father was in ill health, and actually being at the event and speaking at it was
Hmm.
a bit hit and miss, but I did manage to
Oh,
make it. But I was too late for the award ceremony. But I actually won SC Magazine's Outstanding Contribution to Cybersecurity
oh
Award
wow.
that very same night for the work that I've done with the UK Cybersecurity Association.
Hmm.
And to this day, I hold the award, and it was a bit of a bittersweet day because I had what happened to me,
Hmm.
and then I had that all on the same day. And I keep holding that award in my hand, and I keep thinking, I know I must be doing something right, as this would not be in my hand. And I keep having to remind myself of that nearly a year on from winning it all the time.
Yeah. And it's not really like it cancels out what happened. It's more like you've got a tug of war, and it's
Yeah,
just one more
yeah,
hand on the side you're hoping for to win, and not the
yeah.
yeah. 'Cause-
Yeah. So, in terms of
yeah.
negative feedback and so on, I just take a deep breath. I just try to let it wash over me. And I try really, really hard to focus on all the things that I've done and I've achieved. There have been other awards that I've won since then. I've got a book coming out next month, The Rise of the Cyber Women. Um, the work that I'm doing with the association is going great. So I really, really just try so hard to focus on all the positives, all the things that I've achieved, all the speaking engagements that I've had. And even, recently, I've been booked for various things. I was in discussions with another event that was supposed to be taking place this week.
Oh,
COVID-19 hit around
yeah.
March time. And then, of course, everything's, like a set of dominoes, cancelled, 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 cancelled. And I've moved on to doing a lot more online things. So I've
Okay.
taken part in 0 Days Live recently, which is
Hmm.
something that Nominette run. I've been on Infosecurity Magazine's spring conference. That was in March, and I spoke there. Um, for me, the online speaking is great, and of course, it's the only way that we can do it at the moment. Um, but I feel the energy more being in a room and really connecting
Yes.
face to face with the audience. So I think I see a kind of hybrid coming. Obviously, with the way COVID's gone, it's going to be a while before any large mass gatherings and events and so on can take place again. So it's the only way that we can deliver presentations and speaking engagements and messages via online conferences and webinars. But I think a hybrid of that eventually, when the world hopefully starts to settle down a bit and COVID hopefully gets a bit more under control, and who knows, hopefully there'll be a
Yeah.
vaccine at some point. I see
Yeah.
very much the two going hand in hand. But for me, it's the energy that I get from connecting with the audience on a face-to-face basis that I enjoy the most.
I agree. I mean, there is a certain intimacy that's possible with a one-on-one communication, such as we're having here. But when you have that large group that's there really is an energy. I mean, even comedians
Mm,
prefer a much larger group than a smaller one, simply because if one person starts laughing in a large group, everybody will laugh.
yeah,
But if you're in a small group, everybody just smiles and they don't make noise. And it's the same on an online meeting where everybody mutes themselves. So if you have a good reaction, if you don't have video on, you don't see them laughing, you don't hear them laughing, you don't see them, or going, oh, or whatever. That shared capacity isn't there.
Mm.
I don't know. Should we start adding sound effects, soundboards to our presentations if we do it online? So that way, you hit the laugh button or you hit the shock button or whenever you want to elicit a response.
Yeah, I think that would become a little bit like the canned laughter you get on sitcoms from the 1970s. It would become
But
a
I
little
do
bit
like to
like
know
that.
when I'm supposed to laugh. So
Yeah.
that's helpful. Like, oh, that's funny.
Yeah,
Okay, ha ha ha.
that's it.
Well, but but like you're saying though, the event gets canceled, but then you get a different kind of event scheduled. I just it's something that you had uh, in your background. There was a little sign that said, "Believe in miracles,
Mm.
be creative,"
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
and that certainly sounds like the way you go in your life.
Absolutely. And I'm going to add into that fortune favors the bold. And that came out. I am a huge fan of Queen and Freddie Mercury,
Mm-hmm.
literally from the moment I was born, grew up
Mm-hmm.
with them. And when I saw the film Bohemian Rhapsody for the first time
Mm-hmm.
a couple of years ago, and I heard that line in the film,
Mm-hmm.
that was the moment that I really started to push myself with different speaking engagements, applying for speaker opportunities, sending off, call for papers, call for contributors, that kind of thing. Fortune favors the bold. What's the worst that can happen? Yeah, that they say no. And I've had, a lot of my talks accepted that I've done. I've had a lot of articles printed and published because I love writing as well as everything else that I do. And that one line for me encapsulates everything I've done and the journey that I've been on in the last couple of years. And what I would say to anybody that wants to get involved in being a speaker, whether it is in Infosec or in any other area, just go and ask them if there's an event you really want to be at, contact them, get in touch, email, phone, whatever, communication method. The worst that can happen is that they say no. I've done other events and spoken on other subjects away from Infosec. For example, I gave an online talk. My father was diagnosed with a very rare brain condition called
Yeah.
Caspar-2 antibody encephalitis, and I took part in a webinar talking about that and the family's experience of what we've been through, with him and the help of helping other families. So just literally just do it. Just contact the event. Yeah.
It sounds like you're almost launching a denial of service attack on your own calendar.
Yeah, absolutely.
and not every appointment gets made, but the ones that get, for everyone that gets swatted down, you've got, another one that got accepted, and you do that one.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that we have to really determine the difference between what's a daydream and what's a dream. Right? Because like a daydream would be, gosh, I wish I was a, big star and everybody loved me. And a dream is like, I'm going to do my thing until I can't do it anymore.
Yeah.
And I think if you daydream about like, oh, I wish I was a popular Infosec speaker, which some people may do, but some really nerdy people, and I'm one of them. To make that a reality, you actually have to have this. It has to be fueled like a dream, where it's like you can't not do it.
Yeah.
Would that be the how you describe yourself? You just can't not speak.
Absolutely, and it's just something I really enjoy doing, that I'm passionate about. I'm passionate about raising awareness of the growing cyber threat and being a lot more cyber aware. So that's where that comes from. And it's been a great way for me to connect with people, talk to them, share my experiences as well. But there's a lot of hard work that goes with it. And like you were just talking about, the daydream versus the dream. The daydream is, I'm just sat here in the chair in my home office thinking, yeah, I'd like to speak at an event one day, and nothing ever happening. But the actual dream of, yes, I'm going to do it, does involve a lot of hard work, contacting those events, putting in those call for papers, writing those proposals for talks, yeah, waiting for the feedback or that kind of thing. It takes a lot, and it takes a lot of time,
Yeah.
you know, to do that. And it's not just something that happens, you know, overnight. But as a result, I've won the awards that I've won. The
Right.
trade association is going really well. My work's going really well. I've built up quite a big following on my social media channels, my LinkedIn profile, and
Mhm.
so on. So the payoff has just been immense for me.
Yeah, it's I used to teach economics, and we had a thing called the fallacy of the declared preference. Namely, if you say you want something, you really don't want it. Because
Mm,
if you really wanted it, you'd either already have it, or you'd
yeah,
be doing everything you could to get it. You wouldn't be talking about it for sure, because
yeah.
that doesn't get you it.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
I'm moving on to looking at organising my own events. So as part of
Okay.
what the Trade Association was going to be doing was a yearly conference, going to have as well some of the smaller, more roundtable style events and so on for members.
Mhm.
COVID-19 hit, and of course, none of that can happen face to face. So
Yeah.
I'm looking at ways to make that happen in the short term virtually, but then obviously moving on to safe ways to be able
Right.
to do that in a face-to-face capacity event as soon as the things get better on the COVID-19 front, and that can happen.
So coming back around to something you were mentioning earlier about reaching the small and medium business, and then
Mm,
this also works into the work you're doing in
yeah.
your cybersecurity association. Um, you you've also mentioned how you've heard some presenters that they're 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 giving a speech or a presentation to a basic an introductory audience, and they start to get too technical too quickly.
Hmm.
Um, what can presenters do if they know their audience is going to be very limited in technical ability or understanding? What are things we can do as speakers so that way we are understood by that audience?
One of the things that, just going back to an example from a couple of years ago, so
Mhm.
this was actually a course that I was asked to evaluate for a cyber training provider
Mhm.
not too far from me. And the audience was made up very much of professional services people, lawyers, accountants,
Mhm.
etc. And when I got to the course, it was a 2-day cybersecurity awareness course for professional services. It was led by two very technical people. And as a result, I could just see that the audience were not getting it. They just weren't understanding all the different acronyms and jargon and so on. DDoS, 2FA, etc., was just going over their heads. And I would spend the lunch break and the breaks talking to a lot of these people and say, well, when he said this, he meant this. Ah, we get it now. And I just demystified it and brought it down into really easy to understand language. So what I would say to a lot of technical presenters is, if you know you're going to be speaking to an audience like that isn't necessarily going to get all the technical jargon, etc., that you might want to get across, run that talk past somebody that isn't technical, that and get their feedback that you can implement into your presentation and your talk, and try to put yourself in that audience's shoes. You might know every acronym under the sun. You might know
Right.
all the different cybersecurity terms and infosec terms, etc., but your audience won't. So always try to put yourself in the shoes of your audience, which is something I do all the time.
Right. And it's not just say what the acronym stands for, because
Mm,
if I say, oh yeah, 2FA, that's two-factor authentication. Anyway,
precisely. Yeah.
like, wait, what are factors? What's authentication?
Yeah.
Oh, do I need to explain two as well?
Yeah.
Yes, in some cases you do.
Yeah.
I was told there would be no math involved, you know?
That's exactly it, and that's exactly what I had to do in the
Yeah,
breaks on that course I evaluated, was not only just explain what the acronyms meant, but also put things across in an easy to understand way as to what they are, what they meant, and what they do.
I think that's something we forget is
Mm,
how we have different divisions within the English language that are basically specialized sub-languages that are unintelligible to outsiders. I'm sure
yeah.
if somebody was giving me a detailed legal presentation, I would be just ready to start talking about networking to him and hope that I can confuse him as badly as he's confused me, right?
Hmm.
But
Yeah.
definitely being able to explain all those things is, I think it's something that's wonderful what you're doing there for going to the small and medium business market, because they genuinely are starving,
Mm.
and
Yeah.
any scrap we can give is going to help them and help them be a better line of defense, so that way they're not a breach point for something larger that they connect to. Uh,
Absolutely. And quite recently, I've been so busy as well with the sudden move to get a
mhm.
lot of people working from home very quickly, which of course has brought about its own set of ramifications from a
Yes.
security and cyber perspective. Um, so with that mad rush to get everybody up and running online and working really quickly, the cybersecurity side and the infosec side has quite often been left behind, which obviously leads things wide open with stuff like, you know, insider threats, with things like Wi-Fi security on home networks, with company data, GDPR considerations, you
Mhm.
name it. So certainly the last 2 or 3 months have been quite busy and quite interesting to see that transition of getting everybody working from home really quickly, you know, full time. It's one thing to do that with organizations, you know, a day here, a couple of days there in the week, but, you know, suddenly 5 days a week, having their employees having to work from home, you know, full time, that's brought about its own set of challenges for small businesses and SMEs.
Yeah, that's awesome. We're coming close on the time here, and I wanted to close out with uh, a question for you. What are the what are the truths you tell yourself when you're truly honest with yourself?
Mm-hmm.
What do you say to yourself that keeps you going as an infosec professional and as a infosec speaker? What do you tell yourself to
Um,
keep going?
a couple of things, and I think for me it's that just being able to reach, if I just reach one business, one person, one SME, and got them to really think about being a lot more cyber aware through the talks that I do, um, to me that's everything. I want to be able
Mhm.
to, you know, get that message out to as many different businesses and individuals as possible. So that's what I'm really passionate about, and also I think as much as my imposter syndrome does go through the roof a lot of the time, and it certainly did back when I talked about the experience I had last
Yeah.
year, you know, I I know that I have that ability. I've had some fantastic feedback from things that I've done, and for me, that's everything, and that's what keeps me going. And I love being in the industry, despite what I said about the experience I had. I've got the most amazing friends in the industry, brilliant support, fantastic mentors, great network on Twitter, particularly, that I talk to on a daily basis. And I just can't thank them enough for all their help and support. And if you do want to enter the industry or are thinking about being a speaker, there are some really lovely and supportive people, you know, out there that'll hold your hand into taking those first steps.
That's great. Well, thank you so much for your time, Lisa.
Thank you.
This has been Lisa Ventura with the UK Cybersecurity Association, and I'm Dean Webb with Peerless. And we encourage you to check this out and all the other podcasts in this series and other information we have at peerless.com. We also want to thank Eugene Belenky for getting this all together, and we hope you have a great day. Cheers, everyone.
Thank you.